So good evening, everyone. Welcome to this acute pancreatitis lecture series. Whole series on different aspects of management of pancreatitis is being planned. This is the first lecture on which we are going to talk on acute management of pancreatitis. That is management of acute pancreatitis in first presentation. And for this, we have invited Dr. Rajesh Singhvi sir as a speaker. From the day when we have started our webinar, I am behind Rajesh sir to speak something for us, and now I have got hold of him. And believe me, Rajesh sir has taught us during our undergraduation days, and he had taught us the same topic. So the first person's name which came in my mind when I was speaking of this, when I was thinking of this topic was Singhvi sir. So I had called him first immediately speaking about this. So I'm very much thankful, Rajesh sir, you have accepted the invitation. And to support him and to have a very good interactive discussion today, we have moderators Dr. Shrikant Mukhewar sir and Dr. Subodh Gupta sir. So without wasting much time, I'll start the webinar. The first thing which I'm going to do today is just to show you what the poll results are. We have conducted this acute pancreatitis poll. We had sent out around 10 to 12 questions to all our members in VSA and ASN, and we have got responses from those. So based on those responses, what are the things which people do in their routine practice? I'm going to share you with you for 2 minutes, and then we'll go on to the talk. So the first thing which we asked in our webinar poll was, how many patients of acute pancreatitis do you see in a month? So we had got around 63 responses, in which nearly 90% of the patients see up to 10%, means 72% see 5 patients and 24% see around 10 patients in a month. So good volume of pancreatitis is being seen by most of our surgeons. The thing which we asked was, what is the investigation you advise to diagnose acute pancreatitis? So around 60% of our surgeons ask for serum lipase, 29% ask for CT abdomen to diagnose acute pancreatitis. This is what the poll has responded. The commonest etiology in clinical practice which our surgeons see is 83% of alcohol and around 18% of gallstone. The first imaging which you advise, this was one question which was asked. So around 71% of people ask for ultrasound abdomen as a first investigation, and around 29% ask for CT abdomen directly as a first investigation or first imaging for acute pancreatitis. The ideal timing of CT in a patient of acute pancreatitis, this was one of the question, in which around 16% get the CT of for acute pancreatitis at admission. Then around 45% get it at around 48 hours. At 96 hours, 30% of the respondents get a CT scan done. So what are the guidelines? Those will be stressed by Dr. Singhvi sir and Mukhewar sir, Subodh Gupta sir. I'm just telling what people do in their clinical practice, what we have seen it. So the severity grading system which our surgeons use in clinical practice, nearby 76% of people have said that they use Ranson, probably because that is the word which comes in our mind because of acute pancreatitis. Rest Glasgow, BICEP, CRP are around 8% BICEP, and rest are less than that. Patients who go to acute ICU, 85% of the surgeons send all their acute pancreatitis to ICU. 15% send selective patients. That is, no, sorry, 15% send all patients to ICU and 85% send selective patients to ICU. The fluid, around 50% of the surgeons use Ringer lactate as a fluid for resuscitation. 40% use ring normal saline. There is a mention of gel effusion also by some of the surgeons. This is the question in which we asked, what is the rate at which you advise fluids? So 150 ml per hour is the answer given by 4 people. Then there are n number of answers written by people, like depends on severity, 50 ml per hour. What exactly is the answer we'll get in the talk. What should be the fluid and what should be the rate at which fluid should be given. Painkiller tramadol is used by around 58%. Diclofenac is used by 14% and paracetamol by 21%. Octreotide usage, 50% don't use octreotide at all. 37% use octreotide at a dose of 100 microgram TID in acute pancreatitis. Orally, when the patient is pain-free, 80% start orally, and nearly 16% say that they prefer NJ fields to all of the patients. Meropenem, all infected pancreatic necrosis, 55%, 30% patients depend. They said it depends. 15% say that if there is a necrosis, they give meropenem. That is the poll which we have got. This is one of the important question which I want to stress upon. Have you read of modified Atlanta classification? This is on which pancreatitis is divided. So 34% of respondents have said that they have not even read of modified Atlanta. So we'll come to know what it is in our discussion. And this is the last question, in which what do you prefer for infected necrosis? So there are a number of responses. What should be done and how it should be done, we'll see during our lecture. So these were the responses which we have got, and based on these responses, when I shared these responses with Singhvi sir and Mukhewar sir, we found that we need to understand pancreatitis in a lot many better way, or more detailed way. So I present to you Singhvi sir. Mukhewar sir, just you can start a brief introduction about topic, and then Singhvi sir can begin his talk.
Well, thank you so much, Yogesh, for this innovative idea of discussing the entire management of acute pancreatitis, because there have been a lot of changes in the management in the recent past, which has led to improved clinical outcomes in the form of mortality, organ failure, necrosis, and so on. So it is worth understanding about this topic. And I must congratulate Dr. Rajesh for accepting this topic, because he said that he has learned many things after going through the topic. So over to you, Rajesh. I think we can discuss it subsequently at the end of the lecture, the other things.
So I close this camera, yeah?
Yes, you can hide it, sir.
Yeah. Yes. Can you see my first slide? Management of acute pancreatitis.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Good evening, chairpersons, Dr. Mukhewar, Dr. Subodh Gupta. Thank you very much, Yogesh, ASN, VSN, for giving me this opportunity to talk to you about this important disease, management of acute pancreatitis. While reading for this management, while going through various guidelines, I realized there's a lot of things have changed in management of acute pancreatitis. And then we had this poll, and while going through this poll, again, I realized that some things we are doing correctly, but some things we are not doing correctly. And I personally have learned a lot while preparing this presentation. So I hope by what I am talking in next 40-50 minutes, each and every surgeon of Vidarbha will able to understand how do you manage acute pancreatitis in this 2020. I can't move my slide, Yogesh.
You can do that. Just tick on your slide with your cursor, sir. Tick on your slide. Bottom पे आपको arrow दिखेंगे. Yeah, click on that arrow,
yes.
sir. Yeah.
Okay. So just briefly, a bit of anatomy. As you all know, pancreas is a retroperitoneal gland situated in epigastrium, related to T12, L1, L2. So if you correlate this anatomic location with the pain which you get in acute pancreatitis, it will be epigastric in region and radiating to back, because the gland is situated in the retroperitoneum. Now it is covered by a single layer of cells, which is peritoneum, and this all peritoneum is having loose arterial tissue. So the relevant importance of this anatomy is, whenever you get this pancreatic fluid collected because of acute pancreatitis, this fluid and this necrotic material spread very fast in this retroperitoneum up to paracolic guttas, to fascia of Gerota and all that. Again, this anatomy, this is pancreas. You have opened the lesser sac. This is transverse colon, and this is the posterior part of the stomach. And most of these pseudocysts, many of these collections happen in this space. So this anatomy is very important for an endoscopist who want to enter the stomach, puncture this posterior wall, and deal with these collections in the lesser sac. Again, this is very important anatomy, the common bile duct joining the main pancreatic duct and forming a common channel. So whenever there is a gallstone which passes from here and gets lodged here, there is a backflow of bile juice and pancreatic juice into this duct of Wirsung and causing gallstone pancreatitis. That is the most common theory of gallstone pancreatitis, having a long common channel. Quickly, pancreatic divisum, although a rare cause of pancreatitis, but if you have a major duct in the form of Santorini duct, which opens into the minor papilla, which is very small, and if that gets stenosed, you can get pancreatitis because of pancreatic divisum. Quickly, physiology. All these acinar cells make this pancreatic juice, which is rich in proteolytic enzymes. And pancreatitis, the main theory is that there is premature activation of these proteolytic enzymes, resulting in autodigestion of pancreas. All this pancreatitis is also explained by mitochondrial dysfunction, by impaired calcium signaling. Once this autodigestion starts, it's like pancreas is on fire. A lot of body resources, lot of body fluid is mobilized into the pancreatic area, which leads to dehydration and hypotension. How necrosis develops, we don't know exactly, but once necrosis develops, there is a lot of liberation of inflammatory mediators, which in turn produces systemic inflammatory response syndrome, that is SIRS. And this SIRS, these immunomodulators, when they go all over the body, they produce organ failure, which is one of the most important complication of acute pancreatitis. So that there is a local problem producing inflammatory mediators going all over body, leading to organ failure. Now, the human body tries to counteract this SIRS, which is being produced by the immunomodulators released from pancreas. So basically, the pancreatitis is a fight between the SIRS, which is being produced by pancreas, and the human body, which tries to overcome the SIRS. Acute pancreatitis is one of the most common GI emergencies. About 30 to 35 people in 1 lakh population will have an episode of acute pancreatitis in 1 year. It's commonly, as we saw in the poll, it is more commonly managed by physician, at least in Nagpur, but in periphery, I think surgeons are dealing it equally well. The most important team member in management of acute pancreatitis nowadays is an intensivist. We will discuss when to involve an intensivist. The mortality range is coming down, but it is still 3 to 17%. There was a lot of confusion about the definitions of acute pancreatitis. What is acute pancreatitis? What is edematous pancreatitis? But this all definition, this all confusion has been cleared by Atlanta classification, which come in year 2012. We will discuss this in next few slides. A lot of guidelines are there to manage acute pancreatitis, and these guidelines gives you very important recommendations based on the strength of evidence. So I will go through, whenever I tell you a recommendation, I will tell you whether this is a weak recommendation or a moderate recommendation or a strong recommendation, and this strength of recommendation depends upon the strength of evidence. We have already discussed this survey of ASN and BSN. Now, how to diagnose pancreatitis? This is a very strong recommendation in the guidelines that acute pancreatitis is diagnosed by 3 criteria. You should have 2 of these 3 parameters to diagnose acute pancreatitis: clinical, laboratory, and radiological. Clinical is classical upper abdominal pain radiating to back. If a patient comes with this pain, and if you do a laboratory investigation in the form of serum amylase and serum lipase. Lipase is better. It is raised after 1 day. It continues to raise for 3 or 4 days, and lipase has more sensitivity in comparison to amylase. So if these 2 criteria are present out of these 3, you can make a fairly good diagnosis of pancreatitis. Radiology, ultrasound is done on admission, not for diagnosis, but to rule out gallstones, because it has a major implication in management of patient. So gallstone and CBD. But sometimes you have to do CT on admission to diagnose pancreatitis. Normally, you don't do a CT to diagnose pancreatitis on day 1 when you are actually seeing your new patient. The CT is only done if the history is not classical, the pain is not classical, or amylase lipase is not elevated 3 times of normal. So then to diagnose, you can do a CT scan. CT scan is again done in certain cases where there is a strong differential diagnosis of peritonitis, ischemic bowel, patient has presented in shock, then you want to know what is the cause of shock, then you can do a CT. And of course, failure to respond. If you make a diagnosis of pancreatitis and patient doesn't respond for next 12 to 18 hours, then you can do a CT scan to make sure that there isn't anything else wrong in the abdomen and your diagnosis of pancreatitis is correct. So for diagnosis of pancreatitis, you need only 2 criteria out of these 3: good history, amylase or lipase, more commonly lipase, and a CT scan only if needed. Otherwise, CT scan should not be done for diagnosis of pancreatitis on day 1. Actually, early inappropriate CT can be detrimental. You can miss so many things. So CT should be done. We will discuss it later on. Only very rarely a MRI is needed on admission for diagnosis of CVD if it is not seen clearly on ultrasound, or if there are deranged liver function tests. Now, Atlanta classification divides pancreatitis into 2. It's an interstitial edematous acute pancreatitis, which is inflammation of pancreas without any necrosis. And this is the more common type. You get this in 80% of patients. And the second type is necrotizing acute pancreatitis, where there is inflammation of pancreas with necrosis, and this you get in only 20% of the patient. Now, Atlanta classification also tells us how to classify the severity of the pancreatitis. It classifies severity into mild, moderate, and severe. And as you can see, there are only 2 parameters used to decide whether this case of pancreatitis which you are dealing is mild, moderate, or severe. Because severity decision to decide whether it is mild, moderate, or severe is very important. So you have to take only 2 criteria in consideration: organ failure and local complications. So in mild pancreatitis, there is no organ failure and there are no local complications. In moderate pancreatitis, there is transient organ failure for less than 48 hours. So with your treatment, the organ failure subsides in 48 hours, or there are local complications, plus minus. And in a severe pancreatitis, you will have persistent organ failures for more than 48 hours. So any case of pancreatitis, if the organ failure persists for more than 2 days, it's a case of severe pancreatitis according to Atlanta classification. Now, what are the local complications you look for to decide this mild, moderate, severe? Acute pancreatic fluid collection, acute necrotic collection, pleural effusion, etc. Organ failure, you look for mainly for 3 organs: respiratory, cardiac, and renal. And how do you define organ failure? Well, you can do a arterial blood gas analysis, and if you see a ratio of partial pressure of oxygen by FiO2, and if it is less than 300, that means your respiratory system is going to fail. Or if you see a pH of less than 7.3 on an ABG, that means there is frank acidosis and your CVS system is going to fail. But a more easier way to decide organ failure on bedside is simple respiratory rate. If it is more than 20, if your patient is dyspneic, then its respiratory system is going to fail. If the systemic blood pressure is less than 90 and it is not responsive to fluid, then you can have a fair assumption that your cardiovascular system of the patient is going to fail. Or kidney wise, if the serum creatinine is more than 2 milligram per deciliter on presentation, then it's going to be a organ failure. The kidney may fail. Now, why organ failure diagnosis is important? Because if organ failure resolves in 48 hours, the mortality is less than 1%. But if there is persistent organ failure for more than 48 hours, the mortality increases to 35%. So this is one way to decide severity of pancreatitis, that is Atlanta classification. But you have to wait for local complications to occur. It takes time, and you do a CT scan to diagnose local complication after about 3 to 4 days. So you cannot apply Atlanta classification on day 1 when the patient has come. So now, what are the local complications of acute pancreatitis? Definition wise, you can divide the local complication depending upon whether necrosis is absent or necrosis is present. If necrosis is absent, and if the patient has just come in less than 4 weeks old, then it's acute peripancreatic fluid collection. That means there is only collection of fluid without any wall. And if most of these peripancreatic fluid collections resolve, but if it doesn't resolve, and if it forms a well encapsulated wall, then it is called as pancreatic pseudocyst, which takes about 4 to 6 weeks to form. If there is a necrosis present, then it can be either called as acute necrotic collection. That means there is just collection of necrosis and fluid around pancreas or in peripancreatic tissue without any wall. And eventually this acute necrotic collection matures to form a wall around this collection, which is now called as wall of necrosis, which is an encapsulated collection of pancreatic or extrapancreatic necrosis that has developed a well-defined inflammatory wall. So these are the 4 types of local complications which you can get in a pancreatitis, and each of these complications can get infected. It can be sterile or get infected, as you can see in this CT scan also. Now, it is very important, all the guidelines recommend that you must make a rough etiology of the pancreatitis at this stage. You should know what is the etiology in your patient when you are dealing with a case of acute pancreatitis. So take a detailed history, especially previous history of alcohol, previous history of gallstone pancreatitis, detailed history of medication, the common causes, hyperlipidemia, trauma, family history. As you can see, we have not done any lab test to diagnose pancreatitis. Lab tests are done to give us some other indication, like for example, if it's a gallstone pancreatitis, the ALT will be raised. If it is serum calcium will be indicative of pancreatitis due to hypercalcemia, triglycerides are done. So when you take this history and when you investigate, only less than 20% of your patients should fall into the category of idiopathic pancreatitis. So 80% of your patients you should have a diagnosis of what is the cause of pancreatitis, because treatment of cause is very important, and this is a very strong recommendation in all the guidelines. Treatment, how do you treat pancreatitis? Well, it is fluid therapy, and fluid therapy. There is no doubt that fluid therapy is the single most important thing you can do to reduce severity of acute pancreatitis and prevent necrosis. All conservative treatment is targeted to prevent organ failure, including fluid therapy. It has been proved beyond doubt in animal models that aggressive fluid therapy supports pancreatic microcirculation and it prevents necrosis. What fluid to give? Well, various guidelines have recommended a strong recommendation in favor of Ringer lactate. It has been proved that Ringer lactate reduces the incidence of systemic inflammatory response syndrome in comparison to normal salines. So whenever you see a patient with pancreatitis, give Ringer lactate. That is the recommendation in most of the guidelines. Avoid giving hydroxyl starch. Avoid giving colloid. They are not good. Colloid, if given, they can lead to renal failure and increased mortality. How much fluid to give? Well, about 5 to 10 ml per kilogram of body weight per hour. So double the normal fluid which you give to any other acute abdomen. See, pancreas is on fire. All the body fluid is being secreted in the pancreas. So there is significant hypovolemia in a patient of acute pancreatitis. So you have to give a lot of fluids in first 24 hours, almost 2.5 to 4 liters in a young adult, and continue to give this fluid till about 48 hours. Very strong recommendation. Now, how do you decide how much fluid to give? Well, it is a goal-directed therapy. You give fluid to an extent that your heart rate is less than 120 per minute. Your urine output is about 1 ml per kilogram of body weight per hour. And your mean arterial blood pressure is between 65 and 85 millimeter of mercury. So this is how you have to give fluid. These are the parameters which you have to see while giving fluids. Now, even after giving this amount of fluid, if there is no output or insignificant output, then think of acute tubular necrosis and start thinking about consulting a nephrologist. Now, there is a problem with over-aggressive resuscitation also after 48 hours. Over-aggressive resuscitation can lead to abdominal compartment syndrome. And it has been seen that over-hydration can lead to more need of ventilation and more sepsis. So after 48 hours, judge your patient and decide whether to give less amount of fluid. How much fluid to give can also be monitored by doing a very simple test, hematocrit. If hematocrit is high, that means the body is still hypovolemic, give more fluids. Blood urea nitrogen, if the urea is more than 20, that means body is still dehydrated, give more fluid. And basically, it is very important to watch the trend of hematocrit and blood urea nitrogen. If the trend is good, then keep on giving fluid. The trend is very important. Another very important point in management of acute pancreatitis is pain control. Very, very significant. See, most of this pain caused in acute pancreatitis is ischemic pain. So when you give fluids, this ischemic pain improves. For painkiller regime, you have to use a multimodal regime. Most of our colleagues have answered in that poll that they used tramadol, but tramadol is not that good analgesic to be used in acute pancreatitis. It is better to give opioids like IV fentanyl or a fentanyl patch, of course, with a good respiratory monitoring. You can also use morphine, NSAID, or acetaminophen, but I cannot overemphasize what is the importance of a good pain control. If the pain control is not good, you are more chances to get respiratory complication because of basal atelectasis and splinting of the diaphragm. Now, there are various, can I stop here, Dr. Mukhewar? Do you want to add anything, Dr. Gupta?
Please unmute yourself. Mukhewar sir, please unmute yourself.
Rajesh, a wonderful start right from the beginning, a very precise, clear way of expressing the things. Subodh, you would agree with me that it was one of the
Perfect.
wonderful beginnings.
Lucid,
And,
lucid.
Lucid,
Thank you,
correct. You want to have comments, Subodh, regarding the first part of it?
No, perfectly all right.
Perfectly all right. Okay, we can then go ahead, or should we have a couple of comments on the early CT? I think as far as early CT, as you rightly said, Rajesh, the early CT is done mainly when the diagnosis is in doubt.
Correct.
It should be done mainly when the diagnosis is in doubt. In clinical practice, sometimes you confuse perforation with perforation peritonitis with pancreatitis, ischemic bowel, venous thrombosis causing ischemia, and so many other acute abdominal conditions. So many of them, they have a surgical indication, while the pancreatitis is a condition which is medically managed. So early CT is very important.
Yes,
In those
correct.
where the diagnosis is in doubt. The
Yes.
second thing is about the timing of fluids. So the timing of fluids, the golden window is when the patient comes within 72 hours. But if the patient comes late to you, which majority of the times which we face in the clinical practice, that the patient had pain about 7 days back and then he comes to you, so their administration of the fluid is not going to help. But if the patient comes within 24 hours, then that is the so
correct.
the third thing is about the goal directed therapy versus fluid. So what has happened was, because of the severity of pancreatitis, cytokines, fluid segregation, hypovolemia, renal failure, to break this cascade, there was an attempt of giving more amount of fluids. But initial trials have suggested that administering more amount of fluids can lead to, as you rightly said, putting more patient on ventilators, and risk to the life. So then, they have weighed between the two approaches, whether it should be goal directed or adequate. Now, in clinical practice, you have to see two things: whether the patient's cardiac function is normal or whether the patient has renal failure. If the patient's cardiac function is normal, if the patient's renal failure is not there, there is no harm in giving a fluid which may not be goal directed, because the evidence for goal directed fluid is very weak evidence, whether to give goal directed or empirically 4-liter fluids. So though the importance of goal directed fluid has been described, it is difficult to monitor urea creatinine, CBP, urine output, and so empirically 4 liters of fluid, out of which you give the initial part maximum. I mean, the initial 6 hours maximum fluid. So that will help in addressing this patient. But if the patient comes late, it may not be of help.
If we're not heard, correct. So maybe in periphery, the patient is going to our periphery colleagues on day one, and for them it is very important to give adequate fluid. And
Correct.
again, I will like to stress that see, guidelines are guidelines, and you cannot replace guidelines with common sense and wisdom. You have to use a lot of common sense and what is available on ground. How is your patient in front of you? Yeah.
I'll just tell you one trial, the analgesic trials, which have been done in PGI Chandigarh and AIMS, and they have been published, they have been presented in DDW 2018 or 19, where the tramadol was compared with diclofenac. As you said rightly, the tramadol analgesic efficacy was low as compared to diclofenac.
Yeah.
However, the number of patients tried were small, so
Right.
the statistically significant difference was not there.
Okay.
And in AIMS, they have compared diclofenac with fortwin, and they have seen that fortwin is better than diclofenac.
Yes.
So you would
correct.
suggest opioid containing
Yes.
analgesics.
Analgesic.
However,
Yes.
there is a caution that opioid containing analgesics in experimental models have known to cause severe
Sphincter
episode
or-
of pancreatitis and
Yeah.
a delayed resolution.
Yeah, but it has not been proved, sir, in any trial.
It has not been proved in humans, but
Yeah.
such are the cases where you may have this word of caution.
Yeah, yeah. So I would
In
still
my
recommend.
practice, what I do, sorry.
Yeah.
In
Yes.
my practice, what I do is we start with tramadol, because using diclofenac, many of these patients, they have renal failure, they go on for CT, and then diclofenac can cause more of renal dysfunction. So my practice, what I do is I start with tramadol and give them fentanyl patch,
Yeah,
and then
correct.
fortwin SOS.
Yes. So it has to be a multimodal approach.
Yes.
Rajesh, are
Yes.
there any studies about epidural analgesia in such cases?
Sir, very
Because I have
few.
tried
I have
quite a
seen-
few times, and it has worked
Yeah.
wonders.
Okay. Sir, because of some bleeding problems and deranged INRs, people are reluctant to use epidural, but it's a very good analgesia. If you can use it in your particular patient, it is a very good, I think the best one. Better than
Correct.
fortwin and fentanyl.
Yeah, Rajesh sir, please. Next, we'll go
Okay.
ahead with.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now once you have managed this ABC of resuscitation, you have given airway, breathing and circulation. The next is to assess severity of the pancreatitis. The assessment of severity is very important because that is going to tell you whether your patient is being managed in wards or you want to shift the patient in ICU. And it is very important by assessment of severity, it gives you a fair degree of prognostication, so that you can talk to relatives, talk to patients and tell how will your patient do in next 8 to 10 days. So that is why you assess severity of pancreatitis. Now there are many scores and criteria to assess severity of pancreatitis. Some of them like Ranson and Glasgow are called as disease specific severity index. So they are used only in pancreatitis like Ranson and Glasgow. But it has been proved now enough number of times that Ranson, Glasgow and other disease specific criteria for assessment of severity are not good in day-to-day management of patient. They are only good in trials and to convey your result in when you are writing papers. So Ranson, Glasgow should not be used in day-to-day practice. That is the recommendation, strong recommendation in all the guidelines. So what you should be using is a generalized score like APACE-2, acute physiological and chronic health score, which is a generalized criteria. You can use it in any ICU patient. So this has been proved to be superior than the disease specific criteria like Ranson and Glasgow. So APACE score, you can do it within 24 hours and then you can assess it daily thereafter. You have to see many things like rectal temperature, heart rate, respiratory rate, etc. And it has been proved in many randomized control trials that if the APACE score is less than 8, the mortality is low, that is less than 4%. If the APACE score is more than 8, the mortality is high. So increase in APACE score after 48 hours predict severe pancreatitis, and a decreasing APACE score in 48 hours predict mild pancreatitis. But as you can see, this is a very complex and cumbersome score, and most of us are not able to use it. Most of us will not be able to remember all these 12 criteria unless you get it printed on a sheet and put it in the patient's head side. So Apache score is also not that commonly used in day-to-day management of the patient. What you can use in day-to-day management of patient is systemic inflammatory response syndrome, SIRS criteria, at admission and at 48 hours. It's a very simple criteria. You have to take only 4 parameters readily available, like temperature, heart rate, respiratory rate, and WBC count. Although it shows only moderate moderate recommendation in most of the guideline, but you can use this very easily, easily available on bedside. So if the temperature is more than 38 degree, any of these more than two criteria, if they're present, then the patient is said to be having SIRS, and the severity is more. Severity can also be assessed by some single parameters like C-reactive proteins. Severity can also be assessed by a CT severity score, which assesses severity in two ways. You see the normal anatomy of the pancreas, whether it is edematous, whether it is has got fluid collection, and the second part is you see necrosis. And total overall score is 10, and if the CTSI, that is CT scoring index, is if it is more than 6, then it is a severe disease. So what should you actually be doing? Which parameter, which criteria should be using to judge severity of pancreatitis? The recommendation in most of the guidelines is to use all these things which are available. Like, for example, the host risk factors like age, if it is more than 75, comorbidities like diabetes, hypertension, body mass index, if it is more than 30, then all these patients will go into bad prognosis or severe pancreatitis. SIRS on admission, bad thing. Persistent SIRS after 48 hours, bad thing. Organ failures after 48 hours is a bad thing, will have severe prognosis, bad prognosis, and you can assess response to the therapy by nitrogen and creatinine. So actually, what practically you should be doing is seeing all these factors, that you should be seeing a whole patient in three-dimensional way to assess severity of a given patient for pancreatitis. If severe pancreatitis with persistent organ is present, then you have to involve intensivist. There are various trials now which shows that if you involve intensivist at this stage, when you have diagnosed a patient has got severe pancreatitis, then the results are very good. Patient under consulted intensivist in an ICU has lower mortality rates. This has been proved in many randomized controlled trials. Now, the next important thing in management of pancreatitis is nutrition. Now, there was old concept that whenever you see a pancreatitis case, you have to put patient nil by mouth for many days. But now the concept of bowel rest is gone. You can start enteral feeding now as soon as the pain has gone. You can start oral feeds in a case of acute pancreatitis, and it has been shown that if you start early feeds orally, the normal diet, it reduces the hospital stay. Start oral feed as soon as possible when the pain has gone and when the systemic inflammatory response has settled. A very strong recommendation. And 2010 Cochrane meta-analysis of 8 RCTs shows that early enteral diet reduces mortality, it reduces multi-organ failure, it reduces systemic infection, reduces operative intervention and septic complication, and it also reduces bean hospital stay. So as you can see, lots of advantage of starting early nutrition. So the message is, as soon as you can start nutrition, it is good, and start orally. You can give normal diet, low fat diet, regular diet, again controversial, but anything you can give, but start diet. The advantage of starting diet, it reduces the transmigration of bacteria from the intestine, and if you start diet, there are less septic complication, and if you are giving diet, you don't have to give total parenteral nutrition, and it also reduces line related complications. Now, if patient can take orally, well and good. If the patient is not able to take orally, then nasogastric tube versus nasojejunal feed, no difference. Don't wait. It will take 2 days to pass an NG tube. Patient have to be shifted. So we cannot give no. Just put an NG tube and start. They are safe. There is insufficient evidence to use any of the nutritional formulations. They are of no help. The normal diet which we prepare in our kitchen is good enough. Parenteral feeding to be given only if enteral feed is not tolerated or the patient is not taking enough calories enterally, only then supplemented by parenteral feed. For example, if the patient is in ILS, if there are collections, if the patient is in ICU and being ventilated, only then you give parenteral feeding. Otherwise, it's enteral, enteral, and enteral. Prophylactic antibiotics. Prophylactic antibiotics are not recommended in patient with acute pancreatitis. Okay, not recommended, regardless of the type, whether it is interstitial or necrotizing, or whatever is the disease severity, mild, moderate, or severe. You are not supposed to give patients antibiotics in a case of acute pancreatitis. Use of IV antibiotics do not prevent septic complication of pancreatitis. So don't think I have a patient with necrotizing pancreatitis, severe pancreatitis, and if I give antibiotics, it will prevent septic complication. No, it doesn't happen. It has been proved in many trials that there is no reduction in mortality if you give antibiotics, and there is no reduction in the need for operative intervention if you give antibiotics. In fact, IV antibiotics are only given in case of pancreatic necrosis when you suspect an infection. Only then you start IV antibiotics. Antibiotics, if used randomly without any indication, in fact leads to more local and systemic fungal infection, superinfection, and of course antibiotics can lead to diarrhea and Clostridium difficile colitis. So antibiotics in a case of acute pancreatitis only if you suspect infections. No antibiotics in mild, moderate, severe sterile pancreatitis. Routine use of prophylactic antifungal not recommended, and there is no role of octreotide in present day management of acute pancreatitis. You keep on monitoring these patients. You have to maintain oxygen saturation above 95. You have to do arterial blood gases analysis if the saturation is falling below 90. The hypoxia can be due to pain because of splinting of diaphragm, so control pain. There can be basal atelectasis, pleural effusion, ARDS, so that your patient may need a non-invasive or invasive ventilator. Progressive persistent hypoxia is an indication to shift patient to ICU, and you have to give a very good chest physiotherapy in all these patients. Of course, you have to monitor electrolytes, calcium, and blood sugar. So this finishes the diagnosis of pancreatitis and initial management of pancreatitis, the initial 48 hours, and assessment of severity of pancreatitis. Now the next step is how do you diagnose and manage the local complications of acute pancreatitis. So to diagnose local complications of acute pancreatitis, you have to do a CT scan, which you do in about 5 to 6 days when the necrosis has well evolved. So CT scan to diagnose local complications is done at about 5, 6, 7 days. So whenever you send a patient for CT scan, or whenever you think, just question yourself why I am doing this CT scan. And if you are doing this CT scan to detect local complication of pancreatitis, then it is always done a bit late, about 5, 6, 7 days, not on day 1 or day 2. You have to request your radiologist colleague that it should be done, the CT scan should be done by a pancreatic protocol in a multi-detector CT with a very thin slice, less than 5 millimeter. You have to use IV and oral contrast in a specific sequence. Now, once you have done CT scan, you will see 4 types of reports. The one is acute peripancreatic fluid collection. These are the just fluid collections that we have already discussed around pancreas. Most of them settle down. Most of them do not need any treatment. Yes.
Sir, please use your marker. You can use your scroller to show us the peripancreatic fluid collections and all. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
That way,
so these are the So this is stomach. This is pancreas, and you can see these yellow arrows. This shows peripancreatic fluid collection. There is no wall around this acute peripancreatic fluid collections, and most of them they don't need any specific treatment, and most of them they resolve. Now, some of this peripancreatic fluid collection do not resolve, and they form a wall around them. This is a wall of inflammatory tissue and granulation tissue, and these are called as pseudopancreatic cysts. They take about 4 to 6 weeks to form. Most of them contain only fluid, very little necrosis by definition, and most of them they don't need any treatment. The pseudopancreatic cyst needs treatment only if they are symptomatic, or if they are increasing in size, or if they are getting complicated. Now, another very important local complication which you see on a CT scan is acute necrotic collection. This CT image shows pancreatic necrosis with a non-enhancing region in the neck. So this is pancreatic necrosis, which is not enhancing on IV contrast, seen on a CT scan. This is all necrosis, this all non-enhanced area. And this necrosis doesn't have a wall. So it is acute necrotic collection, which you can diagnose by a CT scan on about 5 or 6 days. And there is always a associated fluid collection with this necrosis. Now, most of these necrotic collections are sterile and they are managed conservatively. Most of them remain sterile, and most of them they mature. We will discuss later on to a what is called as walled off necrosis, and most of them at this stage they don't require any treatment. But at this stage of acute necrotic collection, and when the pancreatitis is still sterile, and if there is an organ failure, ongoing organ failure, by this time the organ failure should have settled. But if it doesn't settle by about 1 or 2 weeks of conservative treatment, then you might have to drain sometimes this sterile necrosis also. No role of surgery at this stage. Now, how do you diagnose an infected pancreatic necrosis? See, normally you will have a patient of pancreatitis. Most of this pancreatitis patient will settle down, will have no systemic inflammatory response syndrome, the tachycardia and etc. will be settled down by 8 to 10 days of good ICU care. But if by day 10 or 11 your fever doesn't subside, the tachycardia doesn't subside, and if there is still raised inflammatory markers, then you can suspect that this patient might have infection in the necrosis. And if you do a CT scan at this stage, then you might see a gas in the CT scan. This is enough to make a diagnosis of infected pancreatic necrosis. Or your patient was stable for 8 or 10 days and suddenly this patient gets throwing fever. So in these cases, you should think that this patient may be developing a infected pancreatic necrosis. Now, this is the CT picture of infected pancreatic necrosis, where you can see this air, this dark black thing. This is the air in the pancreas. This air is formed by the gas forming organism. This is not because of perforation of any organ, but this is because of gas forming organisms. Now, routine FNA is not needed to diagnose a infected necrosis because it gives lot of false negative rate. Again, a strong evidence. So when do you have to do a FNAC to diagnose infection in a sterile necrosis? Well, when the patient is not improving in spite of best conservative treatment. You have a patient on day 10, but he's still got little bit of tachycardia. The white cell count is about 10, 11, 12,000. Fever about 99. So this may be because of systemic inflammatory response syndrome. This may be because of infection. So when you are not sure, when your suspicion is not giving you that confidence to treat it as an infection, then in these situations you have to do a CT guided FNAC to prove that there is an infection. You can get a culture also, and if it comes positive, then you have to treat this patient as a infected pancreatic necrosis. So in a case of infected pancreatic necrosis, you have to either start antibiotics or intervene, or you have to do both things. So occurrence of infection in pancreatic necrosis is a leading cause of morbidity and mortality. About 1/3 of patients of acute necrotic pancreatitis will develop infection. They develop this infection late in the course, say about 10, 12, 13 days. There is no correlation of developing infection with the extent of necrosis. The normal organism causing infections is the gut organisms like E. coli, Pseudomonas, and Klebsiellas. And suspicion of infection needs therapeutic antibiotics. This is the only indication to start antibiotics in a case of pancreatitis when you suspect infection. Which antibiotics? Carbapanapen, quinolines, metronidazole. They have got good secretions in pancreas. So all the trials suggest that you can give imipenem or meropenem. What intervention you can do in an infected pancreatic necrosis when it is still not walled off and the patient is not improving on antibiotics? Well, you can just drain it, but make all the efforts to delay your any intervention for more than 4 weeks till this gets walled off. We will see it in the later slide. But if you have to do something, just ask your radiologist to put in a drain into this infected pancreatic necrosis. Now, when to intervene in a case of pancreatitis? Delay, delay, delay. That is the dogma. If you cannot
Yeah.
delay, you can drain. And only when you delay, then delay, drain, and debride is the dogma. Yeah, Yogesh, you want to say something?
Yes, sir. Can we have our panelists to comment on that
Yes.
antibiotic part and the nutrition
Please,
part?
please. Yes, please.
Then go for interventions. Mukhivar, sir?
Yes, yes. Yes.
Yeah, your comments on antibiotics and the nutrition part, which we have just covered, sir. All the
I will just add one this thing for the assessing severity, as Rajesh has clearly said, that the bedside SIRS systemic inflammatory response syndrome is one of the very good criteria to assess severity of pancreatitis. So similarly, there is a score which is called as Bishop score. It's a bedside index of severity of acute pancreatitis, which measures 5 parameters: blood urea nitrogen, impaired mental status. S stands for oxygen saturation, age, and pleural effusion. SIRS and SIRS and age and pleural effusion. So this is a very good score in clinical practice, and any person who has Bishop more than 2 is a person who may need an ICU intervention. So because what happens with Apache score, as you rightly said, there are many parameters, and the chronic health evaluation parameters, many patients are in distress, they will not remember the earlier things. So that is one about Apache, Apache and Bishop. Early nutrition, significant, because the way we practice, we give rest to the pancreas earlier. But now the concept is feed them early. And this is not only true in severe acute pancreatitis, but also in mild pancreatitis. It has been shown that the hospitalization is reduced, admission to ICU is reduced, even the pancreatic necrosis, development of pancreatic necrosis, multi-organ failure, and as you said, mortality is also found to be reduced in meta-analysis. So early nutrition is important. But sometimes it becomes very difficult because the patient is vomiting, he has a lot of pain. So early nutrition as soon as the patient
possible.
And the emphasis should be given to enteral nutrition versus parenteral nutrition. In our setup, because being managing these patients, we prefer to have a NG tube over NG, nasojejunal tube over nasogastric tube, because many of these patients have duodenal ileus, gastric stasis, and there is a risk of aspiration. So in case it is possible, it is better to do it. But as you rightly said, that sometimes you have to send the patient, but they feed them early. So NJ, there is no difference between NJ and NG. But whatever trials are there, they are of very low quality trials and which have not entertained the complete factors. So that is our nutrition, early nutrition, enteral nutrition, and feeding would be, these are my. Subodh, you want to say something?
I agree with all these points. Is there a role of antifungal agent at any stage in management of such patients?
There are very few patients when you do a CT guided FNAC and there you see a fungal and fungus has gone in the culture. I think only then antifungal should be given, but not as a routine.
In patients, those who are given antibiotics, and in spite of say 8 or 10 days of antibiotics, if the fever persists, so either you drain it or consider superadded fungal infections. So better to do, as Rajesh has said, FNAC or blood culture, and if the blood culture has shown that the fungus is positive, probably those are the patients where it is clearly indicated. But sometimes you have to clinically judge that you already given 10 or 12 days of antibiotics and In spite of
There can
drainage,
be
the
a support.
patient is spiking superadded fungal infection.
Yeah, good
And
point.
what's
sir.
the
Yes.
agent of choice? What's the agent of choice? What's the antifungal agent of choice?
Dr. Mukewar, please.
Fluconazole is the major this thing. You know, the first IV antifungal is fluconazole. But if you have culture reports, it will depend
Yeah.
upon basically the nature of the fungus and the culture reports. It should be ideally culture guided, you know. But you can
Okay.
start with fluconazole and then change it to maybe amphotericin or whichever newer antifungals which are there.
Okay, right.
So I continue.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Rajesh, sir. Yeah. We will go.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So when to intervene in a case of acute necrotizing pancreatitis, sterile, infected, or walled off necrosis. So the concept is delay. As much as you can delay, it is good. If you are not able to delay, then drain. And once you have got a good walled off collection, or when there is a good line of demarcation, see, it is very important for your collection which you are draining, especially surgically, that it is nicely walled off and there is a good line of demarcation. Otherwise, I remember in my residency days, we used to open these patients, or our consultants used to, our teachers used to open this patient with pancreatitis, and suddenly they would make a tear in the transverse colon. Why they have made a tear in transverse colon? Because this necrosis is not nicely walled off. There is no difference between the viable part of the intestine and the non-viable necrosis. So allow this necrosis to mature. This takes about 4 to 6 weeks. Let a line of demarcation appear. This will also cause less bleeding. And only once they have matured in 4 to 6 weeks, only then you intervene, either surgery or whatever. We'll discuss it later on. But if you want to tide over a crisis, if patient is not improving by antibiotics, antifungal, then you can put a percutaneous drain. Now, why do you have to debride? Why necrosectomy is important? Because necrosectomy leads to less production of inflammatory mediators. As we have already discussed, pancreatitis is all about inflammatory mediators producing SARS. So if you remove this necrotic material, lot of this inflammatory material is taken out, and so there is less SARS. So this is one concept which has come in after the Atlanta classification, which is called as walled off pancreatic necrosis. So eventually, all pancreatic collection, if you treat them properly, if the patient is improving, they will all eventually mature to walled off pancreatic necrosis. As you can see in this area, in this picture, this collection has got a very good wall, and this is called as walled off pancreatic necrosis. This term was basically coined by an endoscopist, mainly on the basis of endoscopic ultrasound finding. As you get a pseudocyst in a non-necrotizing pancreatitis, you get a WOPN, that is walled off pancreatic necrosis, in a necrotizing pancreatitis. Basically, pseudocyst means fluid, more fluid, less necrosis, and walled off pancreatic necrosis means more necrosis and less fluid. So basically, they are same spectrum of a same thing. One side you have pseudocyst, on the other side you have WOPN. So what are the indications of intervention in walled off pancreatic necrosis? See, all walled off pancreatic necrosis doesn't need intervention. So only if you have infected walled off pancreatic necrosis, you have to intervene, or you have a WOPN but with ongoing organ failure, then you have to remove all this necrotic material to improve organ failure. If the patient has got pain because of this walled off pancreatic necrosis, you have to intervene, gastric outlet obstruction or disconnected duct syndrome. Now, what intervention? To manage WOPN, either you can do a surgical intervention, minimally invasive or open, you can do an endoscopic intervention, or you can do a radiological intervention. Now, surgery has been the gold standard. All these treatment guidelines are based upon the surgeries which has been going on for last so many years. Before surgery was being done for this WOPN, it was seen that infected pancreatic necrosis has a mortality of about 30%. And if the patient has got infected pancreatic necrosis with septic complication with multi-organ failure, the mortality is almost 100%. So you have to do something to improve this mortality, and that's how surgical treatment was being offered to these patients to improve, to reduce the mortality. Now, open surgery is the traditional treatment for infected walled-off pancreatic necrosis. This is still one of the most commonest intervention which you can do in a walled-off pancreatic necrosis. There are a lot of people who are doing minimally invasive surgery and endoscopies, but in our country, in our facilities, in many small villages, in many small centers, the facilities of minimally invasive surgery and endoscopies are not available. So open surgery is still one of the most common intervention which you can do in a walled-off pancreatic necrosis. Now, this is a classical indication of surgery in a walled-off pancreatic necrosis. You can see as here, this is an extended walled-off pancreatic necrosis. The patient has got necrosis in lesser sac. It has got in paracolic gutter. It has got in pelvis. So this is a classical case who will be benefited by surgery, because you cannot drain this. Where you will have to put 3-4 trays. Endoscopy not effective in draining this. So these are the classical case of extended walled-off pancreatic necrosis, which are beyond stomach. These patients should be offered surgery as the first line of treatment. So open necrosectomy is a standard procedure. All of us keep on doing this. The best advantage is you can achieve a full necrosectomy in a properly selected case. You will not leave any residual necrosis inside. You can just take out all this necrosis in a single setting. You can do a large cystogastrostomy of about 5 to 6 centimeter, not possible by any other intervention method. But of course, surgery will have its own wound-related morbidity, and the incidence of fistula, because you are putting drains, is higher in open necrosectomy. By doing surgery, you can do few more things which are not possible by other intervention methods. Like, for example, you can do a close continuous lavage. You can put lavage catheters to wash out the residual debridement, the residue inflammatory mediators which are collecting after you have done the surgery. If you are not able to take out full necrotic material, you can do a delayed closure. You can take patient back to OT after 48 hours and do a re-necrosectomy. If the patient is bleeding after necrosectomy, you can do a packing. So these all are possible if you are doing a open surgery. Now, there is a lot of data to back up open surgery as the method of choice in dealing walled-off pancreatic necrosis. This is a paper in which the contributors are who's and who's of pancreas, almost 20-30 people writing this article, including people from India like Dr. Nilesh Doctor. And this compares minimally invasive and endoscopic versus open necrosectomy for necrotizing pancreatitis. The trial was done in 51 hospitals in 8 countries, and 1980 patients were assessed. And you can see open necrosectomy was offered in 1,167 patients. So still, open necrosectomy is the commonest procedure being done for the patients of walled-off pancreatic necrosis. Again, this article from Gangaram Hospital, a review of more than 2,000 emergency abdominal operations in a surgical unit, and as you can see, open necrosectomy has got a very high number. People are still doing, or open necrosectomy is still good for walled-off pancreatic necrosis. Open necrosectomy has comparable complications, comparable mortality rate with any other procedures. The complication rate is also comparable, the formation of fistula and hemorrhage. There is another nice paper which compares open necrosectomy with percutaneous drain and endoscopic drainage. And in this paper also, the conclusion is that surgical transgastric necrosectomy is an excellent single-stage surgical option for symptomatic walled-off pancreatic necrosis in selected cases. Now, you can offer minimally invasive necrosectomy. We have a separate lecture series next week, so I won't go into the detail. Minimally invasive necrosectomy can be done by a transgastric route or retroperitoneal route, and there are various papers who suggest that they have got a good success rate and and a very less complication rate. But the data supporting minimally invasive technique is very limited. It's a newer technique, and there are lack of well-designed trials, and there is lack of expertise. This is the most important thing. Many of our endoscopists cannot do it, or endoscopists are not available in periphery. So still minimally invasive technique, endoscopy or laparoscopy is not still practiced widely in our country. Now, another concept has come in last 10 years, which is called a step-up approach to manage walled-off pancreatic necrosis. This has come after the famous Dutch PANTHER trial done in 2010, It was a very well conducted trial, multicentric trial, randomized properly, and it offered a step up approach. That means do a relatively small intervention in the initial part, and if needed, do a major intervention in the later part. So step up approach has been shown that it is as effective as open surgery, and it has got all benefits of minimally invasive surgery. So in the initial part, you put a percutaneous drain under CT guidance, either in the flank or wherever the collection is, followed by a retroperitoneal pancreatic debridement. What does this drain do? Is it drains the infection in the initial part when you have put in, and later on this drain gives you a tract to reach the necrotic area. You can put your laparoscope through this tract and debride the necrosis. So this is step up approach. Put a drain first and then debride later on. Now, about 1/3 of the patients who were put this drain did not require ward also. They were treated by this percutaneous drain only. This step-up approach has been shown to have less organ failure in comparison to open surgery, less incidence of diabetes mellitus, and of course less wound-related complication. Now, in 2019, a long-term follow-up of this Dutch Panther trial has also come in, and it shows superiority of this step-up approach beyond doubt over open surgery, and it has been proved now that it causes step-up approach causes less organ failure, less mortality, and less fistula formation in comparison to open surgery. So whenever possible, whenever you have got facility to do radio CT guided drain, consider step up approach in management of walled-off necrosis. Dr. Mukewar can also do endoscopic step up approach. In endoscopic approach, as I've already decided, you can put a gastroscope, identify the collection through the posterior wall by doing an endoscopic ultrasound, and puncture it and let the fluid drain into the stomach. The Bister and the tension trial have come in, which have proved that endoscopic necrosectomy is a good procedure, but you have to have an endoscopic ultrasound to decide where you have to puncture. See, this is the collection, this is the walled-off necrosis, and this endoscopic ultrasound is showing that there is no vascularity in this area. So you can make your first puncture here without damaging any blood vessel and causing bleeding. The second requirement of endoscopic necrosectomy is that this necrosis should be in good contact with the stomach. If it is not in good contact, then you cannot do endoscopic necrosectomy. Another important indication when you select patient of endoscopic necrosectomy, it is better if they have less than 30% necrosis. You can also use this endoscopic necrosectomy as a step-up approach. First, you can just put in some drains, and later on, you can do endoscopic necrosectomy. With the recent introduction of metallic stent, you can do this easily. They are lumen approximate metallic stents. We will discuss this next time. The important indication of endoscopic necrosectomy is that you can deal more sicker patients who are in ICU, which can be dealt with endoscopic necrosectomy. But the problem is sometimes endoscopic necrosectomy leads multiple attempts. There can be bleeding and perforation. So these are the problems of endoscopic necrosectomy. So to summarize, we have three modalities for treatment of walled-off necrosis. Surgery in such type of situation where there is extended walled-off necrosis everywhere is the best treatment. The treatment, how to decide which treatment is best for this patient, how to decide who will intervene in a case of walled-off pancreatic necrosis, whether an endoscopist or a surgeon or an intervention radiologist. This is best decided nowadays by location. Where is the necrosis? So this you should always discuss in a multidisciplinary meeting. All three members should participate and decide according to location who can do the best job. So if the necrosis is mainly in head region, then you can put a percutaneous drain in all three locations, but these patients are best managed by laparotomy. You can remove all the necrosis, do a complete job, a good job. But if the necrosis is in the middle part and if it is in good contact with stomach, the posterior wall of stomach, then endoscopy has a better role to play. But if the necrosis is more on the flanks, the radiologist can put in a drain, and then surgeon can go and do retroperitoneoscopy debridement from that same drain site. So at present time, the location decides, is the best indicator which method to use, whether surgery or endoscopic or CT guided drains. So depending upon the location, decide which is the best treatment. Now, how do you decide location? To decide location, you should have a good cross-section study, a good CT scan. Endo ultrasound is, of course, very good to decide where is the exact location. Amount of necrosis. If the amount of necrosis is more, of course, endoscopy will be difficult. You will need multiple settings. And how do you decide amount of necrosis? Again, by MRCP or by endoscopic ultrasound. CT is not good to decide amount of necrosis. You should have expertise available to do endoscopic and minimally invasive surgery. Nutritional status of patient and comorbidities also has a say to decide which method to adopt in a particular patient. Whatever method you do, a role of critical care consultant is very, very important. He should be the boss. He should be the captain of this patient. He should be seeing this patient regularly. But overall, surgery in our country continues to be the standard of care, and whenever indicated, it should not be delayed. Use of intervention radiology and endoscopic drainage as a part of step-up approach or as one-time treatment is always there, but interventional radiology and endoscopy failure has got increased morbidity and mortality, and they lead to more sepsis and nutrition if they fail. So then it becomes very difficult for surgeons to do a rescue surgery. So present day management of Vaughan, if you can see this, Waldorf pancreatic necrosis, if it is in good contact with the stomach, and if it is less than 30% debris, endoscopy is best. If it is in good contact with stomach, more than 30% debris, open or laparoscopy is treatment. But if the Waldorf pancreatic necrosis is beyond stomach, if it is not in contact with stomach, or if it has gone beyond stomach in the flanks or in the relation of kidney, and then if it is less than 30% debris, then percutaneous drain is good. You can also do open. But if there is more than 30% debris and if the patient is sick, then put a percutaneous drain and do a step-up approach. But if the patient is stable, you can do a open surgery or a minimally invasive surgery. So this is the management algorithm of Waldorf pancreatic necrosis in present day. Just quickly, peri-pancreatic vascular complications. You can get splenic vein thrombosis, which needs conservative management. If thrombosis is extending to portal vein, superior mesenteric vein, you might need anticoagulation. Pseudoaneurysm can sometimes be seen, which needs intervention radiologist to manage. I will be a bit quick because the time is less. Abdominal compartment syndrome is suspected in initial days of acute severe pancreatitis. It happens because of tissue edema due to aggressive resuscitation. We have already discussed. So you have to monitor abdominal compartment pressure by urinary catheter. Most of them need conservative treatment, but sometimes you might have to do surgery. Biliary pancreatitis, laparoscopic cholecystectomy in mild gallstone pancreatitis during same admission reduces risk of recurrent biliary pancreatitis, a very strong recommendation. So your patient should not go with the gallbladder if he has come with mild acute pancreatitis, gallstone pancreatitis. But in severe gallstone pancreatitis, lap cholecystectomy should be delayed till local complications settle, where the acute inflammatory response is settled. Only then you should do a laparoscopic cholecystectomy. ERCP is indicated in a patient of gallstone pancreatitis if the patient has got cholangitis or if there is increasing jaundice, and it should be followed by a laparoscopic cholecystectomy. So to conclude my talk, there are multiple guidelines for management of acute pancreatitis, but you should modify guidelines as per local requirements. There are certain strong recommendations based on good quality evidence, and you should not neglect this strong recommendation. Do not intervene early in a case of necrotizing pancreatitis, at least never in first and second week. The principal dogma is delay, drain, and debride. I will conclude this one of the very good paper which says that many different interventions in varying states of evolution are available for the treatment of pancreatic and peripancreatic necrosis. These interventions should be offered in the context of optimal intensive care and medical management, and that a multidisciplinary approach is required in a center with specialized expertise. So this should be the modern treatment of acute pancreatitis, and none of your patients should say that I am a owner of a useless pancreas. Acknowledgements to Dr. Yogesh Bang and Dr. G.V. Rao for their slides. Thank you very much. Ultimately, it is all teamwork. As you can see, these are 9 husky dogs which pulls one sledge, and they all 9 have a different role to play. So it is all teamwork. Because of this team, this person is pulled ahead. So it is all teamwork. Dr. Mukhewar, Dr. Sumant Gupta. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think it was wonderful, one presentation, and you have absolutely covered all the points very nicely and very comprehensively. I must
Thank you, sir.
compliment you for that. Compliment.
Thank you, sir.
Wonderful. I think if there are questions, you can take up that.
Yeah, sir. We will take questions first, sir, because it's already.
The only one point which I want to emphasize is nowadays everywhere regarding necrosectomy, it's a step up approach than step down approach. I agree,
Correct.
but I don't undermine the importance of open necrosectomy, but I would certainly say that if you want to do the things, it should start with minimal invasive, like cutaneous drainage together with antibiotics, endoscopic drainage. And in clinical practice, what you get is endoscopic drainage is with the use of EUS is much, many of these patients are amenable to endoscopic drainage with the use of EUS and stents. That is what I want to say.
Correct.
I want a
Stent is a
pithy
very
comment
good
from
thing.
you about ERCP-induced pancreatitis.
ERCP-induced pancreatitis.
Yeah.
It is not very uncommon complications. We have been analyzing our data of ERCPs every year and for the last 3 years. And the ERCP-induced pancreatitis is to the extent of 3 to 4% of whatever ERCP, in spite of the fact that the people learning ERCP are attending our hospital. So the factors which are there, young patients, those who do not, those who have minimal indication for ERCP, cannulation of pancreas multiple times, using of dye, these sphincter of Oddi dysfunction. These are the probably common indications of patients who can develop post ERCP pancreatitis.
Yeah, thank you very much. Is there something we can do about prevention, like good hydration and intrarectal indomethacin?
Correct. We normally, it's a practice that in our practice that we do two things. We check the serum creatinine of the patient, and if the patient's serum creatinine is normal, the patient is not very elderly, we routinely give them Zonac suppository prior to the ERCP. And during ERCP, while administering the sedation, we give about a liter of IV fluids during the admission, because it's been shown that proper hydration and Zonac suppository. And the third thing, and the most important, we use the pancreatic stents, small pancreatic stents. If you feel that this patient multiple times the cannula went into PD, or it was a difficult ERCP, needle knife sphincterotomy, young patient, all these patients, then we put a pancreatic stent, because that is one which has been shown to improve the post ERCP pancreatitis.
Yes.
I saw Manoj Vyavhare. Can we have his comments?
Yeah, we have Prashant Bhandarkar sir as well as Manoj Vyavhare sir.
Prashant.
Yeah, because they have their talks on Wednesday. Sir, we'll take questions first, then we'll discuss again, because there are many people who have raised their hands. Dr. Das Gupta sir, first question from your side. Please unmute your mic, sir. Yes, sir, go ahead. We can listen.
Yes, Rajesh, excellent presentation. You have literally vomited out textbook on acute pancreatitis.
Thank you, sir. Sir,
now, I recollect those days when myself and Mukhewar sir managed dozens of acute pancreatitis at Midas Hospital. And we saved a lot of lives, lost a few. I mean, this is one disease which I label it as a Behrupia, you know. It has got so many aspects of presentation and misleads the treating physician and the surgeon. Now, one small tip which I want to recollect and tell, especially to my junior colleagues, is one of the biggest dilemma when you diagnose acute pancreatitis is to predict the severity. Now, all those scales are already there, but at that moment of time, as Rajesh rightly said, it's very difficult to recollect and do all those calculations, you know, and you have to take a decision where to admit this patient. Does this patient go to ICU or this patient goes to a room? Now, one of the criteria, clinical criteria of diagnosing this impending severity, I think, obesity, history of alcoholism, and a patient who is hypoxic. A patient who is hypoxic with a diagnosis of acute pancreatitis and having the slightest of pleural effusion is an impending sign. A patient with a pleural effusion, even the patient with all the hemodynamics normal, is a likely candidate to go into shock very rapidly within 24 hours. And that is why in later part of my practice, when I learned all these things, the first thing I used to do is to get an X-ray chest done, get hold of a radiologist and put a nasojejunal tube inserted, because I know this patient is going to go in coma and I will not have an opportunity to put in a tube, and this patient has to be admitted in ICU. So hypoxia is a clinical criteria to anticipate the severity of acute pancreatitis. Second point, I want to, Rajesh, you made a comment about necrosectomy, and that after doing a necrosectomy, the toxicity reduces and the incidence of SIRS gets less. I beg to differ from you that after all, what is this necrotic tissue you are removing? It is a dead tissue. So it is the residual pancreatic tissue which dictates the secretions and ultimate outcome of the disease rather than the dead tissue. And the dead tissue is not to be touched unless it is infected, proved by intrapancreatic apheresis done, and proving that it is an infected necrosis you are dealing with. The method of necrosectomy differs depending upon your expertise, availability, and the site, and you have elaborated that very nicely. So these are the two comments I wanted to make.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. We'll have next question, Dr. Prashant Rahate, sir.
Rajesh, it was a wonderful presentation. I have one question and one comment. The question is, what is the timing of cholecystectomy in biliary pancreatitis? And the comment is, I will like to have Mukwar sir's opinion also. The indication of endosonography in the diagnostic part. The recurrent idiopathic acute pancreatitis, and if you are suspecting some biliary cause. I think these are the two indications, but Mukwar sir will like to elaborate on sonography.
Rajesh, you can take the first question.
Yeah. So the timing of cholecystectomy, if it is a mild pancreatitis, patient is stable, you should do laparoscopic cholecystectomy in the index admission. But if the patient has got severe pancreatitis, then you should do laparoscopic cholecystectomy when the local complications have settled, when the SIRS has settled. So maybe you discharge the patient and bring back again for a laparoscopic cholecystectomy.
See, actually, it's a classical teaching, as you said, that the lap chole has to be done in the same setting in patients with mild pancreatitis. Because the statistics is, if you wait for 3 months, then 20% of patients will have another episode of pancreatitis, 20% of the patients will have an episode of biliary colic and increased risk to the life. So there are clear indications that if patient has mild pancreatitis, the lap chole has to be done in the same city. And in patients with severe pancreatitis, as soon as the local inflammation and this subsides, maybe period of 4 to 6 weeks, it has to be done. As far as the indication for endosono is concerned, now 80% of pancreatitis we can find the cause, but 20% may be idiopathic. Now, in these patients with idiopathic pancreatitis, the commonest cause is microliths. Microliths are the crystals less than 3 millimeters, which cannot be picked up by routine ultrasound. So endoscopic ultrasound is indicated in all those patients, those where we could not find the cause, after a period of 4 to 6 weeks, after recovering of episode of pancreatitis. In many of these patients, they can have what is called a starry sky appearance, or they can have a biliary sludge. And if you have a persistent biliary sludge or a starry sky appearance, then you confirm that this is a microlith causing pancreatitis and offer the patient a cholecystectomy. In fact, earlier it used to be an empirical cholecystectomy before EUS. And EUS also helps in guiding whether the patient has underlying chronic pancreatitis with acute exacerbation, pancreatic divisum, and vascular complications which are associated with pancreatitis. Normally, it should be done after 6 weeks of episode of recovery of pancreatitis.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah.
We have Bhandarkar sir online. Sir, now you can just give your comments on the discussion part which we have already listened to.
Okay, I joined in a bit late, but it was a fantastic presentation. I mean, the medical aspects also you covered so well. Hats off. Very nice.
Thank you, Prashant. Thank you, Prashant.
Pick up with Dr. Rate's question, which Dr. Mukhewar has already answered. But Dr. Mukhewar, sir, one thing I would like to point out more for in your setup, it is possible because you are doing US now. So if you are suspecting, strongly suspecting CBD stone in the first week of biliary pancreatitis, and somehow you're not able to shift the patient for MRCP, or you're unable to decide for sure whether there is a CBD stone or not, which is lurking behind. So you can do a EUS at that point in time, and if there is a CBD stone, you should do a sphincterotomy and remove the stone, because then that will not only improve the course of the further biliary pancreatitis, as well as it will take care of any cholangitis and obstructive jaundice.
Correct. I fully agree that biliary pancreatitis, if there is an increasing jaundice and cholangitis, then there is a role of urgent intervention and ERCP. The patient has mild pancreatitis without increasing jaundice, though biliary, there is no indication for urgent ERCP.
We have Ramya Nisal, please ask your question. Dr. Ramya Nisal, please ask your question. Unmute yourself. Okay, by that time, sir, I'll ask a question from Dr. Vikas Jain. I can't unmute his mic. He has asked how to evaluate a patient of recurrent acute pancreatitis. The patient is non-alcoholic, ultrasound and MRCP has shown no GB calculi or anything. So what are the next steps of evaluation of recurrent acute pancreatitis?
Yeah, again, a good history, genetic analysis. We have already discussed role of endoscopic ultrasound and an MRCP. So ultimately, you should have only less than 20% of patients labeled as idiopathic pancreatitis in your practice.
Okay. My question to all the three medical gastro we have here, same question. Mukhewar sir, Vyavare sir, and Bhandarkar sir. So EUS is also negative. We have a patient who is coming up with recurrent acute pancreatitis. Sir, we have a same patient in our ward, Mukhewar sir. So should we do cholecystectomy for these patients even if EUS is not showing calculi? Can cholecystectomy help in these patients?
See, before doing cholecystectomy, I would like to have the genetic studies and other complete workup. Yeah. Number one. Number two, always in the clinical history, always ask for drugs. Find out whether the patient has, these are some few things like you have patient with the pancreatitis with renal stones and they turn out to be hyperparathyroidism. So, I mean, these things have to be ruled out before offering a surgical intervention. And of course, there is a problem that the sensitivity, specificity of EUS in diagnosing microliths, I'm not sure about the exact percentage, but it's one of the good investigations. But it cannot be said that microliths are not seen on EUS that means we can totally rule out biliary pancreatitis. So if you have a patient, young patient, relative, multiple episodes, and you rule out other causes, divisum, this, that thing, autoimmune pancreatitis, you need to offer a patient a cholecystectomy if he has recurrent episodes. I would
Yeah,
certainly.
Yeah. Best is to talk to patient, tell them your diagnostic problems, and say that it is a relatively minor procedure nowadays.
Correct.
And it
I
might
agree
help
with
you.
you.
It might help. Nobody knows
I have had 2
whether it
patients
helps or not.
of malignancy presenting as acute pancreatitis, periampullary malignancy. How often, I mean, did you come across
See,
all this entity?
the dictum is any patient who presents as episode of acute pancreatitis after the age of 50 years, 50 or 55 years,
Yeah.
one has to do a EOS in that patient to find out whether it's a first presentation beyond the age of 50, 55. One has to rule out malignancy because it could be first presentation in a patient with
It was
malignancy.
exactly like this. And
Sir,
do
one
you
more
concur with the diagnosis of pancreatic colic? I have seen one patient in whom I did a scopy for upper abdominal pain, and I found roundworm, half inside pancreas and half outside.
Correct.
Wow.
I
Interesting.
treated this patient and the colic disappeared.
Wow.
Sir, one
See,
more
What did you do for the patient, sir? Dr. Subodh Gupta? You found the
Yeah.
worm and what did you do?
No. I just removed the scope because I was scared of the ascaris migrating inside.
Okay.
And at that time, there were 2 types of anti-helminthic agents available. One would stiffen the worm and one would paralyze the worm. I used the one which will paralyze the worm, and it worked.
Sir, one more practical question. So, like as we see, 80% of our patients are mild acute. No, sorry, not 80. Like majority of our patients are mild acute pancreatitis. So, in a mild acute pancreatitis based on the modified Atlanta, do all patients need a CT scan? If the patient is settled upon day 3, day 4, we usually discharge them. So, should a CT scan be done in all these patients?
No. No indication.
So we don't have any other hand being raised up here. There are 2-3 questions which people have typed. I'll just read those questions quickly. So there is a question from Shamal Shah. Kindly define acute on chronic pancreatitis. I guess it's a different entity. Sir,
Sorry. Acute.
kindly define acute on chronic pancreatitis.
Yeah. So chronic pancreatitis by definition is where the structure of gland has changed. In acute pancreatitis, when the disease recovers, everything becomes almost normal. So if there are repeated acute attacks of in chronic pancreatitis, then it is acute on chronic pancreatitis, acute exacerbation of chronic pancreatitis.
So there is one more question from Jineet Shah. WOPN drained once by endoscopic ultrasound guidance. What would be done about the necrotic tissue? Is debridement is done through endoscopic approach? I guess we'll discuss this on Wednesday when our medical gastroenterologists present how
Yes.
to do necrosectomy
Yes.
endoscopy. Right, sir?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So most of the questions are being done. Yes, Methi sir has a question. Methi sir, good evening. Please unmute your mic. Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes,
Sir,
sir.
good evening.
Sir,
Good
good
evening.
evening.
Good evening. Good evening. No, I don't
Sir.
have any question. For the first time, I am listening webinar.
Sir, so nice of you. Thank you.
So I thought I should listen to Dr. Singhvi and Dr. Mukhewar. There is no special question.
Your enthusiasm is worthwhile, sir.
Thank
This
you,
is
sir.
for the I have heard a webinar.
Sir, please do attend on Wednesday and Friday also. We have very good guests, speakers, and a good session being planned on Wednesday as well as on Friday.
Now
See,
I'll
I
do
must
that.
say that I must say that I was fortunate to be Dr. Methi's student, and he's such a meticulous teacher. And still, when Dr. Methi asks some questions, it's difficult to answer them.
Sir, Dr.
Okay, thank-
Mapari sir has asked a question, role of somatostatin.
Almost no role in present day practice. Just never use it. No
So, sir,
evidence.
most questions are being done now. We can close off the session. To all the
Yes.
attendees, this is the last slide, which is very much important. I have shared this article with all of you in WhatsApp group. Just take out printout of this paper and keep in your OPD. You will by heart the management of pancreatitis with this one single page. So it's a very good article. You can all go through that. And with permission of our panelists, I'll like to close off the session for today.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Let me express
Thank you.
my sincere thanks on behalf of Subodh and myself. We are extremely thankful to VSA for involving us in this, and especially to Yogesh for keeping the academic standards of Surgical Association so high. Thanks for all your efforts, and thanks for all the interactive session. Rajesh, you are wonderful. Compliments
Thank you, sir.
to you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
I
Gupta.
agree.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Yogesh.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Singhvi sir, it was a revision for me from my undergraduation days. It was a beautiful lecture, sir. I loved it.
Thank you. Thank you. All
Thank you very
credit to you, Yogesh. Thank you.
No, sir. No, sir. It was a great lecture.
Lecture on medical management from surgical side to so much amount of depth I have listened for the first time.
Oh,
First
great,
compliment.
sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Yeah,
Bye.
sir.
Good night. Good night.
Manoj sir
Bye.
and Prashant sir, please be online. Rest of the people can leave. We will just have a screen trial. Manoj sir, you can share your screen if you are listening to me. Yeah, I can see your screen now. Open your PowerPoint. Yes, sir. Show me your webcam also, sir.
What is this? How to exit?
Sir, I'll remove you, sir.
Please remove me. I don't know how to exit.
Yeah. Manoj sir, please share your webcam. आप कुछ बोल के देखिए सर, आवाज नहीं आ रहा है आपका.